We're live. We have got a super stream today. Yes, you can see a whole lot of people in this. We're all going to talk about some big Sky basketball. First off, why don't everyone introduce yourselves? I am Cameron Richardson with the Ridge Report out in Flagstaff, Arizona, covering NU men's and women's basketball. Got so many people here. Uh, we've got Victor Flores out in Montana, Lance out in Montana. We got Brendan, who's the sports editor of the Lumberjack here in Flagstaff. Brett Hine out with Weber. I forget what's the. It's a platform. It's a newspaper you write for. Or is it your own thing?
Yeah, no,
Brett?
I'm the sports editor at the Standard Examiner in Ogden. So
We've got Jaden Watson Fisher with the Greeley Tribune, Greg Woods with the Idaho Sports Journal, and Joe Terry with Big Sky Valhalla, another Substack. Right, Joe?
Yep.
Yep. All right, so I'll kind of open the floor here for this one. For mid majors in general, with Big Sky, I thought we had, a couple of favorites with, Montana. I thought Weber State would be on top clearly, and then it would be Montana State falling right under. But now it seems we got like 4 or 5 teams that can break through, and teams that are at the bottom half are sort of pulling off some upsets as well. So I'll open the floor here and ask, is it better for mid-majors sort of beat up on each other and there's maybe 5 or 6 in contention, or, is it better for mid-majors to have, those 1 or 2 teams that can kind of, we can look at and go, oh, they can make deep runs in March. Those like Gonzaga and West Coast Conference, although Gonzaga really isn't a true mid-major, but the Murray States and the Belmonts in the Ohio Valley, or even the Florida Gulf Coast and the ASUN on the women's side. What are we all thinking here?
I'd say it's beneficial to get good competition. You're not in this league, other than early in the season, going to find top level competition like your Kentuckies or Gonzaga for a few teams that are close by. But you're not going to find that throughout the year. So you want to have close games and find the situations that you're going to mimic in tournament play. But I wouldn't say it's different whether it's one team way out in front or whether it's 4 teams clustered at the top.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's something Steve Smiley's talked about a lot here is, the depth and the parity reflects what you're going to get in the tournament, assuming you get there. So having that experience and having, those the late game pressure, when you have to make those free throws at the end, if you get to the big dance, you're going to have to do that. And having that experience is going to be great. And I think it's just great for the league. People want to watch fun games. Sometimes a blowout is good for us for deadlines, but sports fans, they love the crazy, buzzer beaters. And I think you're going to get that with this league, and it's fun.
Yeah, I'd say it depends on who you say it's better for. I mean, for the Big Sky, it's better to have more parity, more competition. I would say for the league itself for the season. And then if you want to make a deep run, then yeah, that's good for the Big Sky, to play well and to have a great team in the NCAA tournament. But I think, so it's a little bit of, you don't want like one team to run away with it. But then if they do, then you're like, okay, well, maybe they have a shot to be a higher seed and actually make some noise in the tournament. So it's a little bit double-edged, but I think overall you just want a bunch of good teams and one to kind of play close and win, and then upset some teams in the tournament.
I was gonna kind of say what Victor said. It's a weird balance because you want good competition, but also it's been a while since the Big Sky has won a game in the NCAA tournament, and honestly, to do so, they've got to get off the 15 line. You got to get at least to the 14 seed or better. Montana State might be able to do that this year. Nobody else will. Weber's taken too many losses. Northern Colorado's record isn't good enough. So it's hard once whoever comes out on top, you want them to have a little success. And it's been, I don't even know, 13, 14 years since the Big Skies won a game. So, yeah, it'd be nice to have good competition and someone who maybe separates themselves a little and has that kind of pedigree to go get a win.
Yeah, I think Brett to add on to that with Weber State men, a lot of people expect them to be at the very top and sort of dominating the league. But if you're a Weber State fan, is this season sort of, incredibly frustrating?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little weird because, they started the game with 8 straight wins against some decent mid-majors who ended up being, okay. They beat 2 teams from the Atlantic 10, which, is a big deal, even if they're not that great, because the Big Sky is just not of that profile. But and then they went on an 8-game win streak in conference play too, and got to 11-1. And for a minute there, the schedule caught up to them, so it was understandable. Like, they're not going to win. No one's going to go 19-1 or whatever in the Big Sky. That's just not going to happen. Well, not now. Montana did it once upon a time, but after that, it's been a little head scratching because they clearly, when they play well, they're clearly very good. Like when they were in Greeley, they just completely hammered Northern Colorado in the second half. And they played really well in Cedar City too. But then coming down the stretch, they've gotten these situations where they've had a hard time stopping guards getting to the basket, just kind of staying in front of everyone, and just some defensive breakdowns that were atypical of their success previously. And so now they're sitting in a place where they could finish anywhere from 2nd to 4th. And they're still a good team, could still win the tournament, but when you're sitting at 11-1 and have 8 games left, you kind of think you might be able to win the regular season title. So in that regard, that is a little bit of a letdown, and I know fans are frustrated by that. So they'll have to see if the Wildcats can help give them some redemption in the tournament, I guess.
Now, Joe, I've kind of since Portland State men came out to NAU last month, a month and a half ago, they came in, they blew out NAU by 30 after taking Southern Utah to overtime and losing. They've been on a roll this second half of the season and are arguably the hottest team on the Big Sky men's side before everyone heads to Boise. So, how is that? How have they really turned the season around? And, is there a true possibility that they could shock this entire conference?
I mean, there's always a possibility out there, right? I mean, so yeah, to your point, I looked at it was January 15th of this year. They were last in all of Division I in effective field goal percentage, which is the combination of 3-point and 2-point percentage, where it weights 3-point percentage a little bit more because it's worth more points. Last in all of Division I, not just last in the Big Sky, 357 in the country. So they went from that to pretty much accidentally falling into a small ball lineup because they had a COVID wave hit the building and knocked out both of their bigs, and one still hasn't come back. So they had to go with this smaller lineup, and it ended up opening up the floor and making them really more dynamic on offense, and making it to a point where they could actually hang with some of the teams at the top because they have the athletic talent on the team to do that. They just weren't able to. They just had a bunch of bad shots and just a bunch of ugly jumpers at the beginning of the season, and it was. I'm sure it was frustrating for new coaching staff. I mean, almost complete roster turnover for the second straight year. So it's one of those things where you kind of expect it to take a little longer to gel. And then with COVID interruptions, it takes even longer than that. But it was, hold on one second. Help. Sorry, Sesame Street's on. I had to get there. The letter of the day. But yeah, so yes, they have a real chance, especially with the way they're playing. They've won 8 of their last 10. I think Northern Colorado and Montana State are the only other 2 teams to do that. currently. And so they have a real chance. One of the hangups is all those games have been close. So you kind of wonder if they have a bad shooting night and are they able to get back again? So I think there's a real possibility, especially if they're able to win on Saturday night and get that 6 seed, play the 11, and then have a more favorable path to the finals. But I mean, it's March; anything can happen, right?
I want to jump in there and talk about Portland State because, Joe's out there in the Pacific time zone, and just so happens watching Big Sky basketball, they're a lot of times when Portland State's at home, they're the last team playing. So I watched them a lot through the season, and they almost beat Southern Utah at home. They should have had Montana at home. They were playing a lot of close games, and then like Joe said, all of a sudden they kind of have this lineup that works a lot better than what they had before. And when Weber went up there, Kalia Thomas is hitting threes, Squire's hitting threes, and they look like a completely different team. So if that's the team they have, they feel like a lot better than a 6 or a 7 seed, whatever they end up being, because it felt like they were right there the whole time, even with the struggles they had. So I think Portland State's an interesting example of kind of the parity of the league, and how there aren't a ton of matchups. When you get in the tournament, there aren't a ton of matchups. Maybe a couple for each team where you feel like there's someone has a clear advantage. Otherwise, I feel like matchup wise, anything can happen, and Portland State's a good example of that.
And the thing with Portland State too is, to your point, because of the lineup they have, where they have Kalia Thomas, who's basically a 6'10" guard, playing 5 right now. They are to a point where they're averaging, I think, 24, forcing 24 turnovers a game. And that really just disrupts the flow of any other offense that they're going to play. And so they have some matchup issues when they play the teams like Montana State, who have some bigs that can challenge them, and have some shooters that can be more consistent. Then it becomes a bigger issue. But man, they've been in a game every single game down the stretch, and it's been fun to watch.
And to your point, that disruption it's incredible, because they swept UNC, one of the best offensive teams in the nation, because they got them so out of their rhythm and they turned it over 20 something times. I think Portland State, is kind of, I don't want to say they're an underdog, because I think most people who have consistently watched the season can see how good they are. But maybe a dark horse, maybe not someone you would initially expect, but they're better than some people might give them credit for.
Greg, with the Idaho State women, they started off their season kind of slow, dealt with a handful of injuries, but now bounced back and kind of, I wouldn't say run the table, but they've, reasserted their spot at the top of the Big Sky. So is there, how have they been able to just deal with the injuries and been able to rebound after that really slow start to the season?
Well, I think part of it is just that they just have so many girls that have been in the program for like a million years. Like even outside of like their main like 4 or 5 girls, it's just like such a veteran team. So even when like you said, like beginning of the season, they had girls that were sick, girls that were injured. I mean, even one of the best players had this like finger injury that was nagging her for a while that totally took her out of her rhythm, totally changed the player that she is, or that she was. But I just feel like they just have so many girls that just know their roles and just kind of know, what they're out there to do. So when girls go down or they have to come out, or like the lineups, shuffling in and out, they don't really have a lot of hiccups because they just know the girls in there know like what they're out there to do. So even like, for example, like when Dora Golish had this like finger injury that totally changed her role. She's like coming off the bench now. Excuse me. She can't, shoot as well, obviously, but she, I just think that like girls like her and the girls that have been out, like Callie Bourne, like she was out with this like clavicle injury that somehow she came back like a month after that. I thought that was insane, but somehow she found a way to to come back. But they just have like so many girls that have just been there for a while. and they're just like tough too. Like Callie is from like Australia, and her dad played like American rules football, which is not to be confused with rugby, by the way. I've come to understand those are two very distinct things over in Australia. But they just I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but they just have so many girls that just like understand what they're out there to do. They were tough. They're a very undersized team, so they kind of don't match up as well with girls that are bigger, more physical posts. But I think when they can rally to the ball and then on those catches, they're just so hard to beat.
I believe we've been joined by Sean Ellertson now. Sean, can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely. Can you guys see me? I can't see myself.
No, we can't.
Okay, my camera's on, but it's not working. All right.
Well, I kind of want to go on to the Montana schools, Victor and Lance. Lance, first off, Montana men's basketball has wins over Montana State and Weber State, but also lost at home to NEU and has a loss to Idaho as well. Just how do we, sort of define this team that currently sits 5th in the conference, just so much inconsistent play. They good defense, but how do we assess them before they head off to Boise? Lance, I think your mic is off. Victor, you kind of, I don't know how much you know about Montana basketball. I know you're Montana State, but if you can speak on Montana until Lance
I couldn't really speak too much on the Grizz. Lance is the guy who mainly covers them, but I could talk a little bit about Montana State at least, and as you saw with Montana, they just beat Montana State, one of the 4 teams that beat them. That rivalry games can get, especially Cat Grizz, they can get kind of crazy, and you don't always have the best team winning, or you sometimes have results that wouldn't match up if you had, neutral, the same talent, but at a different school. That's not to say that the Grizz didn't play well and didn't deserve that win, but that's sort of how those games can go. And it's clear that, Montana's just not very consistent and has highs and has lows. And that's kind of, that's just sort of common, we're seeing with a lot of teams. Weber State being a good example. But, as far as Montana State and the men's team, they're looking like the pretty clear favorite. They've beaten every team that they've lost to in the Big Sky. Really, other than that Montana game, they've been pretty much won every game of the new year. That they lost in overtime to Eastern Washington, a game they probably should have won and nearly did, in a wild game with some questionable ref calls. Big Sky refs. We could maybe delve into that if we want, but it's they're not. I wouldn't necessarily say they're going to run away with this tournament, because they obviously show they can lose, but they've got. I was watching them last night. Clinch the regular season title, or the sole possession of it, and they're deep. They have a couple. Xavier Bishop and Jabril Bello are 2 great best players to have, and then you can just throw a bunch of other guys, and Raekwon Battle off the bench has been really kind of a revelation. So I think it wouldn't shock me if they sweep through the tournament, but I also wouldn't bet on that either. So it'll be fun to see how they do.
Yeah, and even the Montana State women as well. We could really, there's a path to both Montana State men's and women's teams get into the NCAA tournament, and I was kind of surprised. I don't know if I should have been or not, but Montana State not only has skill and athleticism, but they have the size as well, where it's like, if they were to win the Big Sky, they could really give, wherever they sell on the line, a 2 or 3 seed, some tough fits come the NCAA tournament. So, just what have you thought on the women's side? Darian White could win Big Sky Women's Player of the Year. Just, how have they just been able to mesh and fit so well to have a really successful season?
Yeah, they're a really good, like you said. I mean, they've got size, they've got some really good shooting. They're so well balanced. And the thing is, Darian White has played at least shot really bad the last 7 games. She scored a career high 32 against Idaho, and then the 7 games since she hasn't even averaged 10 points and shot like 23%. It's been kind of you wonder, what if there's fatigue, maybe some nagging kind of injury pain sort of thing with her, but it's she's still contributing. They're 4-3 in those games, so they're still playing decently well. I think to win the tournament, to beat Idaho State, they probably need her to return to more of that prime form, that midseason form. So I think she can, but I mean, they've shown they don't need her to necessarily be a great shooter in a dominant offensive player. She plays good defense. She still makes her assists and rebounds are still pretty consistent with what they've been all season. So she's amazing. She's it's kind of a bummer that she hasn't been playing super well, because when she's at her peak, she's really fun to watch. But I mean, they could totally compete with Idaho State. I think. I mean, it's I believe they did beat them. The one time they've split those 2 games. So it's pretty stacked. I think women's. I mean, both sides are really what do you call it? They're both really deep and consistent. But this is Montana State, if they win tonight, will tie with Idaho State for the regular season title. So it's pretty neck and neck. So but Cola Badbear's been really good in the post. Leah Beatty and some really good bench players as well have really been good role players. I mean, this is my first year covering Montana State sports, and the football team makes the national title game, and now both basketball teams are going to potentially be the Big Sky champions. The hockey team is going to nationals. Like, every single team is really playing well. It's kind of a good time to come to Bozeman, but so it's a lot of fun. But I think with the women, it's Idaho State, I think, should be the favorite right now, and it kind of just depends if Darian White can play well, I think.
I was actually in Bozeman for the ISU and Montana State game, and I was because I think White was out with some sort of like COVID deal when they came to Pocono. So when I saw them in Bozeman, that was my first time ever seeing her, and she was the most like intriguing player I've ever seen, because like I don't know how many short guards there are in 2022 that can fill it up, but they just can't shoot very well. I thought that was insane. So that was nuts. But then on the other side, she I think ISU recognized that she couldn't shoot that well, so they would like almost give her like the Ben Simmons treatment and just like invite her to shoot these like threes on the perimeter. And then of course the one she hits is like the dagger to like seal the game. So I guess like there was a little bit of like fatigue, because they literally had like their 3 starters or 3 other starters fell out in a span of like 30 seconds to end that game. So they're playing a little shorthanded, they're tired, whatever. But I just thought it was so interesting that one of the best players in the Big Sky is this short, like speedy guard who just like somehow does not have like an outside shot in her game, which is like hard to find in the year of our Lord 2022. So I thought that was just so interesting, but I was super impressed. It was a lot of fun to watch. So I think those are obviously the 2 best teams on the women's side in the Big Sky. So I would love to see them play again.
And I should say, Darian White's she still gets to the free throw line a decent amount. I mean, she is kind of I don't know a good comp. I'm trying to think of one. I mean, like maybe even like a Zion Williamson, but smaller as far as like I mean, until recently she could still just she couldn't shoot, but she would still get to the rim anyway, and you couldn't really and she would just get to the foul line anyway, and it wouldn't. It's sort of like, okay, well, I mean, you could go under screens, but she'll still find ways to beat you. So it's pretty fun. I mean, Xavier Bishop is barely taller than Darian White. He's about 5. I think he's listed at 5'8". I don't know if that's completely accurate, but he's their best player on the men's side, and he's so fun to watch. I mean, he's just quick and got handle, and so Montana State's kind of they're the leaders of the conference on both sides a little bit, but they're led by these tiny little guards. It's a pretty cool situation. But I think Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if either team, if Montana State wins both conference championships next week. But yeah, it's still that definitely would not be something to bet on. I think it's way too wide open.
Lance, how's the audio working?
I think you guys can hear me now.
We got him. Yep. Yeah. So Montana men.
I have no idea what's been going on, but I think it's the immaturity. They're a very young team. They don't have the senior talent that the Weber States have, the Montana States have, Southern Utah, but they just keep getting in these games. So sometimes you're going to win them, sometimes you're not. And that's just going to be the way it is. They can grab a game in the tournament. It won't shock me if they make it far. But you can also lose in the 4 or 5 game because that's where they're going to land.
Sean, same thing with there's sort of been an inconsistency with Southern Utah as well. And then the men getting in their own way. It's kind of allowed the women to shine as well. And the women's Southern Utah team has done very well this season. So they've kind of impressed. They've definitely impressed me more than the men have. But when I look at the men, how have they gone in their own way? Because they have a very explosive offense, still number 1 in the Big Sky. But what's preventing them from being that top team and the favorite that many predicted going into this season?
To me, it's their defense, particularly down the stretch. Been at a handful of games where they've just kind of faded at the end, especially on the defensive side. I watched the Idaho State game earlier this week, and they made a big comeback in the first 10 minutes. Then, Montana State, pardon me. And Montana State just kind of shut them down, and they couldn't get a stop. Xavier Bishop kind of took over that game late down the stretch. And I talked to Coach Simon and last week, and he said they were 3 to 5 defensive possessions from being a good defensive team, and they just haven't kind of made those adjustments or those strides in the final 2 weeks. So to me, it's their defense. As you mentioned, they have an explosive offense. They aren't the best shooting team in the world, but they have an explosive offense. John Knight III and Tevian Jones, who talked to Coach Simon 15 minutes ago, and Tevian is kind of out indefinitely with a wrist injury. They're kind of seeing where he's going to be at. So it doesn't sound as though he's going to play tomorrow against Weber State, which is a huge loss. Obviously, that's a huge game. And yeah, it's just been their defense. And as you mentioned, the women have kind of really taken some of the light away from them. And they beat Idaho State. They came out and shot the lights out in the first half and beat them by 20 after kind of laying an egg against Montana. So kind of a path for both teams to really make a run here, but especially for the men, if that defense doesn't come around, I could see them going home early, honestly.
And Jaden, the Northern Colorado men just seem to be sandwiched in between, the top of the top with Montana State, Weber State, Southern Utah, but they're definitely not. I think they're better than Eastern Washington, Portland State, and the rest of that bottom of the Big Sky. So, how do we feel about Northern Colorado before next week?
I have mixed feelings because they can be really, really great, and they can be really, really fun to watch. Obviously, the game that comes to mind is that Southern Utah win at home, 32 points in 5 minutes, just absolutely nuts. But at the same time, like, you look at the record and you go down the list, they have some really bad losses too that they should have won. There's just inconsistency. And again, I think their biggest issue is also on the defensive end, because they can do a really good job at stopping opponents and, being disruptive. But at the same time, if they get a little too comfortable when shots are falling, they'll step off the gas a little bit and, let teams stick around. At the same time, like I said earlier, when teams are really dynamic and they can force turnovers, that's a problem for UNC as well. They just, like I said, they have games where there's like 20 turnovers and games when there are 4 or 5. And so, They have the veteran leadership to where I think they could do it. I'm not putting money that they'll win the tournament, but they could surprise everyone. I'm just not super confident. I think if they had more consistency, they would be a little bit higher favored. But unfortunately, some of those issues kind of make it hard to be like, oh yeah, they're definitely going to be, one of the teams on Saturday. I don't know. I would like to see them. I would like to see them do well, just because I know so many of the senior guys and just the ones who've been on the team for a while. They haven't gotten there. Close, but not quite. Even under Jeff Linder, when they went, I don't know, they won 20-something games and they won another postseason tournament, but they haven't gotten to the big dance, and that's really what they want. I'd like to see it. I'd like to go. I'm not super confident that they'll do it.
I just wanted to jump in and say I think that's why Montana State won the league, right? Is they're the only good team that could be consistent. Other than Weaver played really well up in Bozeman. Like Victor said, Montana State lost that overtime game at Eastern, which is like whatever. But everyone else, Weaver State, Northern Colorado, Southern Utah, they all kind of have had the same problems where they can't quite get a handle on the things that make them flawed. Like Northern Colorado could outshoot anybody, and they could run the table. That wouldn't be surprising. But sometimes they just don't play defense. And like Southern Utah, Tevian Jones sometimes disappears for entire games. And like I said, Weaver lost at Idaho. So I think that there's 5 in Montana too. Maybe even Portland State. There's a group of teams that I don't think anybody would be super shocked if they won the men's tournament. But that's why Montana State has clearly separated itself, is because they've won the close games. They've been consistent enough to get those wins, and that's why the tournament will be really interesting. But you just never know. There's a handful of teams, you never know which form of their team you're going to get that night. If that makes sense.
Now, Brendan, Jalen Cohn's recruitment way before.
We're gonna say bye-bye, guys.
Later,
Thanks for having us on, man.
Yep. Now, Brendan, Jalen Cohn's recruitment way before the season started was pretty much nationally covered coming out of Virginia Tech. He goes to NEU, and what was pretty much a surprise, and he said that he wanted to lead a smaller team and be that main guy. Well, he's been the main guy, but the problem is that no one else around him has contributed. And Lance, you can speak on this too, since you've covered NEU in the past. But I mean, you bring in a guy like Jalen Cohn, the guy that can score 20 points per game and 30 on some nights, and NEU just the bar hasn't moved. The needle hasn't moved one way or the other. And now a loss to Idaho ties them for last in the conference with Idaho State. Just Brendan, what's not working in Flag Staff? I mean, this is a thing that's been going on forever, but what just hasn't worked this season?
I mean, you kind of just brought it all up right there. Jalen Cohn has been the guy when he came out here and announced that he was coming to NEU and passing up offers from Power 5 schools. He came in wanting to be that guy. He came in wanting to be the guy who can lead a smaller school that has struggled recently and lead them on a Cinderella run. I remember he cited Oral Roberts and the run they had in last year's tournament. And he wanted to do that, and clearly he's shown that he can be a leader for a team and a guy who can be an easy Big Sky first teamer, second in scoring and all that. But yeah, you kind of mentioned right there, he just doesn't have the help right now, and I think that teams have kind of figured out not to necessarily neutralize him, but to contain him in a way where pretty much anytime he has the ball, they're doubling him, and then it forces him to try and find another guy out in the perimeter to shoot, and those other players aren't scoring. I mean, right now he's scored more than 25% of all NU's total points, and if you're going to be a contender in the Big Sky, let alone a team who can at least sniff at being a contender, you're going to have a second guy. They have players like Nick Maines who can shoot the lights out from three because Jalen Cohen just takes up so much attention when he has the ball, but that's not going to be enough. I mean, they have other guys like Keith Hayman, who is streaky at best. He had a career high game last night, but that doesn't happen consistently. I think it's just a matter of, rotations is one thing, but Cohn came in here knowing that he was going to be the guy. NAU last year, they lost their two best players on offense, Cam Shelton, Luke Avdalovich, and I think that's come back to haunt them. It's just the offense is too one dimensional, and the defense just is not going to be able to be enough to carry them.
Yeah, Lance, you've covered NAU for years, but do you think that it's more than just a personnel problem? It could be just a player morale problem, a culture problem as well, where it's just like, okay, you come to NAU and you're expected to lose, and that's the mentality that maybe players and a lot of staff have.
I commend Shane Burkar for being able to.
We lost him again.
God damn.
Oh.
How's that? Got me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Sorry, guys. So I commend Shane Burkar. He's been able to do what he can at NAU, but I think that is the toughest place to win in the Big Sky Conference. I don't think there is a job that is as hard as anywhere. I think NAU, they've struggled since the days of Mike Adris being a great team in the Big Sky Conference. Ever since he left, ever since Jack Murphy left, they just haven't been able to build any consistency. Gone are the days of Chris Yonku leading a CBI tournament, CTI tournament appearance. We thought Cameron Shelton was going to be the guy to do it. Jalen Cohn looks like the guy to do it, but they just can't build a roster. They have one dude every couple of years who shines, but they can't actually get wins or build a roster that can contend, because if you have one guy, all you got to do is keep that one guy to 12 shot attempts like Montana did, and you beat them by 10. If you can contain that one player, blitz him on pick and rolls, not let him get his shots that he wants, then you're going to make NAU lose. They're a pretty simple team to figure out. Jalen Cohn is a dynamic player. He's a great basketball player. There's no doubting that. But the roster, aside from Nick Maines, who I think is a very underrated player, and he has become a legit stretch forward. They play him as a small forward for some reason. He's awesome. But outside of those two, I think you and I talked about it a little bit. Imagine if Cameron Shelton stayed. Imagine if Luke Avdalovich stayed. Then we're looking at a team that contends for a top 5 spot in the Big Sky Conference.
Yeah, and you brought up spacing with Cameron Shelton as well, and obviously that hasn't been the case with him at LMU, and he's kind of been a no-show since moving over to the West Coast Conference. But yeah, I mean, NAU just overall roster, they don't have a wing shooter. You would expect Keith Hayman to finally not be streaky after 3 years of doing that, but it's just the same dude every single year. You had 24 last night at Eastern Washington, but other games he's 2 of 14 from beyond the arc. So it's either he's either Klay Thompson or he turns into playoff Harden at certain points, and it's frustrating to watch if you're an NAU fan or just anyone who is observing NAU basketball. But in terms of roster building on the women's side for NAU, they've got a handful of seniors that are leaving after this year. Lauren Orndorff, Karika Rashid, Nina Rafford, who have all brought this program from the depths of the Big Sky and have become maybe not a true conference winning contender, but at least they've threatened now. And Brendan, is this like the year that's like, okay, they at least have to get to at least the semifinals or even make the title game to be like, okay, we did something with this program. Now still they did come from the bottom and work their way up to the mid pack, but still it seems like this is a team that has a depth to make that run. But the question is can they find the consistency? Can they rebound certain teams to be a legitimate threat?
Yeah, I think that's been their biggest deficiency so far this year. I think with obviously with COVID and injuries and all that, I think size in the post has been their issue. Karika Rashid is one of the best bigs to do it in the Big Sky, but she had a slow start to the year, admittedly, and then she recently was out a few games with an illness. I think that's been their biggest deficiency. And like you mentioned, they have 5 seniors that are leaving. 3 of them are full-time starters. 4 of them can be a starter. 4 of them are at least the first 6 that go out on the court. Mickey Alamayo. This is the year to do it. I mean, I would say that they are contenders for sure. They've been contenders for a little bit now, but this is the cycle. I mean, Coach Lori Payne, has done a great job in bringing this team back up to where it can be in potential wise. But with the talent they're losing, and just a matter of what this team has shown flashes of in the past, this is the year to do it, because after this year, who knows what's going to happen with how much they're losing.
Lance, I know it's hard to impress you, but I mean, you've seen the NA women at the worst of their worst, but ever since that group of Orndorff, Karika, and Nina have sort of brought NU up, have you been what's been the most impressive about this run in Lori Payne's tenure so far?
Man, shoot, it feels like ages ago. 4 years ago, Lori Payne was hired to replace Rob Thomas, right? That was my senior year of college. I never thought NAU would be where it is now. That women's team hasn't been better by all metrics, better than the men's team, right? But they haven't been able to get over that hump. There's a proverbial hill they haven't crossed. They have all this talent. They have all the makings of a team that should win the Big Sky Conference title. They just haven't. Last year, I thought was the year. This year, they brought back basically everyone. Losing JJ Nakai to academic problems was a very massive hit. That was the best shooter, one of the most dynamic offensive players, a local star, went to Coconino High School in their backyard. And I think that hurt them. Obviously, she didn't play well for the most part, and academics are academics, but that expanded their offense. She was massive last year. Having Orndorff back this year obviously fills that hole because she missed last year due to health problems. But there's just something they can't get over. Lori Payne has been awesome for the program. She's built it from the depths, really just of nothing. They were a bad program for years. Basically were the end thing. But they just can't actually break through from Montana State, Idaho, when they're rolling. Southern Utah this year has been a surprise. How do you get through that hump? Especially next year, Brendan talked about it. They're losing so much talent. They have good young players in the back, but you're losing Tyler Goodshue, losing Lauren Lundau. Those are your stars and your mainstays. I think they were Payne's first recruiting class.
Final predictions as we head to Boise next week. I want your overall winner and then a potential dark horse to keep your eye on that could shock the Big Sky. And we will start with Sean.
For the women, I don't know. I think on both sides there's a lot of teams that could really win this, and I know that's automatically kind of a cop-out answer. I do think that if the bracket shakes up, it could very well be the SUU women versus Montana. Both teams rank in the top 5 and a ton of categories on both sides of the ball. So I think that would be a very interesting championship game. I don't know who would win that. I would like to say SUU, but I don't want to be a homer or show any bias. But I do think that if things kind of hold to form, I believe right now the SUU women are 2 and Montana's 4. So if the bracket doesn't change too much over the next day or so, I think that could very well be your Big Sky championship. And I don't want to disrespect Idaho State at all. Obviously, they're at the top of the conference, but just seeing how SUU played them and kind of bounced back after a loss to Montana, it's so hard to say right at the top there. Admittedly, I don't have too big of a dark horse for the women. I do think that it's pretty solid up there at the top with Idaho State, Montana State, SUU. But I do think Montana would win a matchup between Montana and Southern Utah, despite Southern Utah having balanced scoring. And like I said, they're in the top 5 in a bunch of categories, but Montana's gotten the better of them twice. So I will go with Montana there. And on the men's side, as much as it pains me, And if anybody from SU is watching, I apologize, but I do think Weber kind of comes out on top. They have the depth, they have the senior leadership there. So I do think, and I've seen Weber with Overton and McEwen just kind of take over games down the stretch. So I do think Weber, you're welcome, Brett, for this. We'll come out on top of the men's. But once again, I could see Eastern Washington kind of making a run, I guess. They have an offense that can score. Once again, it comes down to the defense. They're kind of like SUU, and that could very well be your 3-6 matchup in the first round, assuming Weber gets the better of SUU tomorrow night, which they already have once earlier this year. So that'd be kind of an interesting 3-6 matchup. But yeah, it is kind of close to the top, but I think I will go Weber for the men. So Brett, you're welcome for that. And yeah.
Well, we'll go to Brett next.
All right. Well, you put me on the spot here. And you told us you were going to ask us this, and I still don't have a good answer. I'll go start with the women's side. I would say Idaho State is your favorite. Obviously, they're at the top of the conference, but just with their experience and their coach, I've seen them at the Big Sky tournament lots of times in the past 6 years. They've got a coach who knows what he's doing when it comes tournament time. They've gotten to the title game when they weren't the favorite a couple times, I think. So yeah, I mean they're a fairly complete team, and I would expect them to play well in the tournament setting. Give me 1 second to relocate. My heater's about to turn on, and it's loud in the room I'm in. Sorry, it's weird.
Well, I think for me on the women's side, I think you can throw kind of 7 teams as potential winners. I don't think Sac State, I don't think is no pushover. And then the Idaho women have won 6 in a row. So, I mean, if you get hot at the right time, anything can happen. While Idaho hasn't been consistent all year, they've won 6 in a row, and we'll see what they do tonight against NAU. But that's a potential swing game. And I don't think that's something we've kind of, overlooked, is that those buy spots are still open on the women's side. So that could really flip this whole, how we look at the Big Sky women's side, upside down, depending on how the results play out.
Yeah, I was gonna say Idaho might be one of my dark horses on the women's side. I would consider Southern Utah a dark horse just because we haven't seen them do it. As good as they've been this season, we haven't seen them do it in the tournament. So it wouldn't be surprising if they were there at the end, but I would consider them an underdog to do so, I guess you could say. On the men's side, man, I don't even know. Like I kind of hinted at it earlier, but it's all just it all feels so matchup based. Like Sean mentioned, Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is a weird team, right? Like they just start 4, 6, 7 guys and then a 6'10" guy in the middle. Like they're huge, and if they're shooting well, like I don't think anybody wants to play them. I don't know. Does that mean they're a dark horse to win the tournament? I don't know. Same thing with like Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado could shoot so dang well that they could do it as well. A couple weeks ago, I would probably have gone with Sean and picked Weber State to win it because they would look that good for so long. I don't know if it's a fatigue thing or maybe a little bit of a case where maybe there's a way to scout what they do well and try and take it away a little bit. And that's kind of caught up with them. So yeah, I couldn't tell you who is my favorite to win the men's tournament. I don't know. Victor's seen what Danny Sprinkle's done with the Montana State team, and they look. I don't know. I haven't been around him. I don't know what it is about his coaching style, but they look like a confident group that's kind of borrowed some sort of, I don't know, some sort of attitude or bought into kind of an approach that really works for them.
Yeah,
And
they literally borrowed Ubuntu. That's their motto. And Doc Rivers inspired Ubuntu. So
yeah, I mean, as of right now, they've just clearly been the most consistent, and they may go out and lose Saturday to Northern Colorado because it's a game they don't need, and I would probably lose on purpose if I was the coach, to be honest. They've had 4 games this week, and then they got the tournament next week. I don't know if I'd play my starters that much, to be honest. And then that would put Northern Colorado as the 2 seed if they win that game. So, but yeah, I guess when it comes down to it, Montana State's been the most consistent, and even they're not a perfect team, and they've shown that other teams can jump up and get them. Over the course of 19 games, they've proven that they're the best. So, as of right now, I guess that would be my favorite.
Brendan, I know you got class coming up. So who you got?
All right. So starting off with the women's side, we mentioned before, Idaho State, they're the favorite. But I think if I were to had to pick right now, not needing to know where everyone slides out, I'm going to say I think Southern Utah has a very solid chance. I mean, we can go off on their game just a couple of days ago where they beat Idaho State by 6 points there. I think they've shown to be a good team. When they came to NEU very early on in the season, they were both the only 2 teams that were 3-0 in the conference, and Southern Utah showed that they came in a Flagstaff and they took a win there. And then when NEU went to the road against Southern Utah, it was probably one of their worst showings. The Lumberjacks, it was one of their worst showings of the year. So I think Southern Utah is really, really a standout choice there. I think obviously, like what was mentioned before, it's all going to come down to matchups. Who's going to have the easier path? Is a team going to have to play Southern Utah, Idaho State, or Idaho State, Montana State? Are they going to have to play them back to back in order to get to a championship? That's kind of where I'm thinking about it in terms of tournament play. But as for a dark horse, it's going to sound like, again, I'm a homer, but I think NEU is a solid candidate for being a dark horse because they're still fighting for a bye. They don't have that clinched yet. They control their own destiny. If they get a win tonight against Idaho, then they have at least a 5 seed. They'll get the first round bye, but there's a very decent chance that they don't get that, which would make their pathway a lot harder. Another dark horse could be Sacramento State. They have 2 of the most dynamic players that complement each other so well, and they got Tillman, who's the leading scorer for the women on the women's side. So I'm surprised that they're still fighting for getting a decent seed in the tournament as well. So and then for the men's side, I think it is a toss up between SUU and Weber. I think they've shown that they can be the most consistent. They've shown that they can have really strong showings against good competition. But if I had to pick one, and it's kind of it's a real 50-50 shot, but I think I'm going to go with Weber. I think from what was mentioned before, I think from what we've seen of them, they have the veteran leadership. They have the culture of winning. They've been a great team for a very long time at this point. So I think I'm going to give them the nod there. And for a dark horse on the men's side, I'm going to say Northern Colorado is a good contender for dark horse. They've had a fair amount of good wins very recently. They beat Montana. They got a very needed win against Idaho, who has shown that they can get on a little bit of a streak there. They beat Weber in overtime last month, and they're winners of 4 of their last 5. And they got their game against Montana State coming up tomorrow. But I think they're a solid dark horse. I think they have the size and they have the shooting as well, to where they can really mess with some teams and they can really surprise people. So that's what I have.
We'll go Jaden next, and then we'll close with Greg, Victor, and then Lance.
I don't know on my favorite. I mean, the easy answer is Montana State, just because they have been so consistent all year. But at the same time, Weber has been at the top of the conference for so long. I don't know. the sentimentality in me will go with Montana State, I think, just because they've had such a great year, and winning the regular season for the first time in 20 years, it would be cool for them. And they do have the skills, and they do have the ability to really command the floor from start to finish. Oh crap, my husband's alarm is going off, so I'll hurry up. I do think UNC could be a dark horse. Like I said, they have a lot of skills. They can do things very well. They've settled into a nice rotation that's working for them. It's the matchup. If they can get, I honestly think being one of the 4 or 5 seed would be better for them, because they seem to play to their opponents, right? So they have really taken it to some of the top teams in the league, but they've also had some really terrible losses, and sometimes they just play down to their competition for some reason. So honestly, I think it would be good for them to be kind of in the middle of the pack. They'd have a chip on their shoulder, what have you. But yeah, I think they could do it. But just what we've seen from the Bobcats, I think they'll do it. So, and the women, I don't know. Everyone knows Idaho State is good. But I would like to see maybe NAU or Southern Utah with it. They did play pretty well this year. I don't think Northern Colorado is going to do it, just because they don't have the offensive firepower typically. So, yeah, I think that's what I'll go with.
I was muted, but we're back. On the women's side, here's where you guys all accuse me of being a homer, like you guys have said. But I am going to go to Idaho State women as my pick to win the women's tournament. I just feel like for all the things they've gone through this season, between the injuries, they've had problems like with matchups, like you mentioned, Sac State Brendan with hope I'm totally gonna butcher her name, but Nadabu. Hope I'm saying that right. I might not be. I don't know. But she was a huge problem for them the first time they played. But then the second time they played, they figured out a way to kind of deny her catches and kind of double her and get out the shooters. So, but my point is that like all the different things that have kind of been a bugaboo for them this season, they've kind of started to figure out. They're getting all their girls back, and they're at full strength at this point. So I just feel like all the things that were kind of holding that back early on that led to losses, like the one to UNC like a week or so ago, even the one just the other day to Southern Utah, where Southern Utah shot like 70% like in the first half. Like that was almost like an outlier or like an anomaly to me because they just shot it so well. So I just feel like they're kind of coming along at the right time. They're putting the issues that plagued them earlier kind of like behind them. And so, ISU definitely my pick to win the women's side. My dark horse, though, is Sacramento State because, like I said, with Nadabu and Tillman, I just feel like even though their supporting cast is not like particularly incredible, when you have two playmakers like that, like there's just no telling how far those guys can take you. And so I feel like if they can get hot, because not a lot of teams, I mean, not every team, in the Big Sky has a girl that can bang, down low with Nadabu, and not too many girls can get, like stay in front of Tillman, especially when she's hot. And so I just feel like that if they get hot and they start playing well, I think they're definitely a dark horse. So that's the women's side. On the men's side, I'm going to go with Montana State. I don't know. That's like the most basic, like vanilla pick I could ever possibly make, but I just feel like they've been the most consistent. So it's hard to pick against them. As far as my dark horse goes, I don't know. This is like picking a name out of a hat. I don't have some strong opinion on this. Let's go. I don't know. Montana. I don't know. Is that like too insane to pick? I don't know. But that this is just me going with something random. So that's who I'm going with.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much along the same lines. I think Idaho State deserves to be the favorite on the women's side. I think, a few weeks ago I might have gone Montana State just because, or, pre-Darian White slump, but until she can kind of show that she can return closer to what she was, I wouldn't go there. And then Idaho State's just been otherwise the best team clearly on that side. So, I think Idaho is kind of a sexy dark horse just because of their win streak, but I don't love to read into end of the year win streaks. Sometimes I think that's been shown that stuff isn't always predictive. Playing hot at the right time is not maybe always true, or doesn't always lead to postseason success. So I think I kind of like. I mean, North Arizona, I feel like it could be a little bit of a surprise, but that's kind of just like picking a name out of a hat to some extent. It's not totally like based on anything super big as far as dark horse on the women's side. So I think really those top three teams are probably the three teams that I would expect to be the main contenders. Montana can show they're up and down, and they show they can compete. And Nadabu is really good, but I think those top three are kind of the ones that I would pick. And then I mean, Montana State is on the men's side should be the favorite, and they played the best. I mean, I said earlier they've beaten every team on their schedule. North Colorado is the one team they haven't beaten in the Big Sky, but and so like Brett said, I mean, they probably won't and maybe shouldn't win tomorrow just because of what it means. But they lost in overtime in that game, so they've basically all the teams they've lost to have been extremely close. And yeah, like Eastern Washington was that crazy overtime game. I mean, Weber they crushed after losing to them. Montana they've split in two pretty close games, or two pretty fairly even games. I'd like to be obviously everybody here would love to see a rubber match with the Montana teams. I personally would love to see Montana State face Jalen Cone again. Xavier Bishop versus Jalen Cone was one of the most fun games I've seen this year. Just a couple 5 foot something guys just going at it and filling it up. I'd love to see that again. That would have been my dark horse if they haven't struggled so much on the men's side. But I think maybe Portland State's intriguing to me on the men's side as a dark horse, just because they had a 5-game losing streak in a lot of close games early in the season, and they've kind of picked it back up and lost to Montana State by 3 at home, and they've really played well lately and just kind of played well the last half of the Big Sky schedule. So that's kind of an intriguing team. But I really think those top 3-4 teams are probably the best contenders. And I think if Montana State had done this before, we would pretty much be picking them as the clear favorite, just especially with how Weber has played. But I think it'd be unfair to say Montana State's going to run away with this just because they haven't done it yet. But I think at the same time, Danny Sprinkle has injected some confidence and togetherness into this team that wasn't there for 2 decades. And they've played so well under him since he got there. And it's so I wouldn't think that they're going to be, the inexperience or the lack of getting there is going to hurt them. So I think MSU on men's side and ISU on the women's side are pretty, boring, but I think pretty safe bets.
I'm kind of with Victor on the women's side. I think it's Idaho State. Seton Sobolewski is the best Big Sky women's coach we've seen since Ross Seldig in the U.S., right? It's their program. It's their tournament to win. I don't think anyone else can really hold a candle to them in the conference tournament. It'll probably be close. That's kind of how the vibe is big. Anyone can beat anyone, right? I think Montana's a dark horse on the women's side, which is almost weird to say. And I think them and NMU are almost the 2 major dark horses. They're both a handful of possessions away from being a higher seed. Either one of them could have a bye depending on how tonight goes. And you really don't know. I think if Montana gets the bye, they're the dark horse. If NMU gets the bye, they're the dark horse. It really just depends how that final seeding works out, right? Plus, the Lady Grizz, we haven't seen them at full strength for basically a month since Sandy Fatkin went down with an injury. We don't know what they look like at full strength. We haven't seen that since they were so good early in the season. NAU, similarly, they've battled injuries. They've battled inconsistencies, but they've shown the ability to be that good. On the men's side, I don't trust Montana State. I don't trust Northern Colorado, Weber, Southern Utah, Montana. Anyone can lose. It's really matchup dependent, like Brett said, and it's beating the dead horse, but you don't know. Montana State looked the part of the contender last year. Then they kind of tank, and then they get stopped by Eastern Washington, who was by far and away the best team a year ago. There's no team like that this year. There's no one who's just dominate that much better. There's no team that has a roster that you can look at and say they are the best team by far and away. If Montana and Montana State meet in the semifinals, which assuming Southern Utah ends up in the 4-5 game, I think that happens. And I think Montana beats Montana State in that hypothetical matchup because someone mentioned coaches and coaching pedigree in the tournament. I think you take a Travis DeCure or Randy Ray over a young guy like Dan Sprinkle, someone younger like Todd Simon, because they haven't been able to do it. Ray has, DeCure has. I think you take the coaching. Now, my favorite, I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably Weber State. Kobe McEwen, Randy Ray, it's hard to bet against a team that when they looked good this year, they did look better than Montana State. They did look the cream of the crop. Brett mentioned it. They've had up and downs like everyone else. Who knows what happens? Dark horse-wise, I'm going to split it into two categories, right? I think Southern Utah, Montana, and Spence are both dark horses among the top 5. Both of them have shown the ability to play with the best of the best and beat them. But also, in Montana's case, lose to every single bottom 4 team except for Sac State, which the jury's out, they might lose tomorrow, which would be all 4 bottom 4 teams. I think the actual dark horse, better said long shot, is the Portland State because they're dangerous. They play a hectic style. No one really plays that way in the league. The closest is Southern Utah, Northern Colorado, but their defense, their length, it's not the same with Philly Thomas down low. The way those guards play, Michael Carter, they just do things differently that really screw up the rest of the league. No one can really match up with them. The closest is Southern Utah, Northern Colorado, Montana when Mac Anderson's healthy, but he hasn't been for the past month since the NU game. So if that's a matchup, that's a scary matchup for anyone. You don't want to play Portland State.
Any final thoughts before we get out of here? Are we all good?
I have one thing. Did any of you guys watch the last CNC basketball series that was on Netflix like around this time last year? No. Oh my gosh. Okay, I can't believe it. Okay, so so it was based on East LA, like the JUCO school there, and they had all these kids. Like one of them went to like Long Beach State, but one of them went to Sacramento State, whose name is Deshaun Heiler. And I was so jacked that they were coming to Pocatello, but I couldn't be at the game. But it turned out that this guy does like not even get on the floor for them. So I was like, you are kidding me. I can't even see him, and he does not even play for them. So I was excited, but clearly he's not as big of a piece as I thought. But anyway, that was kind of a disappointment.
Anything else, or are we all good?
Yeah, I got one final thing for Brett. Brett, I talked to Coach Simon this morning. You tweeted at me last night about Dre Marine. Sickness was the reason he only played 8 minutes. He was sick and tried to give it a go and couldn't. So I figured I'd just answer that right now. So he should be ready to go for the conference tournament. Don't know if he's going to be at 100% tomorrow night. Once again, another guy kind of on the mend for SU tomorrow night at Weber. So,
yeah, see, that's a factor that we haven't really talked about because most coaches try to hide it when they have when they're having injury problems or illness going into the tournament. Which is why, Victor, I said Montana State should not play their starters Saturday. Because when Montana State played in Ogden, that was Weber State's 6th game in 13 days. They played Monday, Thursday, Saturday, 2 straight weeks. And that's the stretch where they handled Southern Utah. They hammered Northern Colorado in the second half. They beat Eastern Washington. and then they just got to the end of that, and they just had nothing left, and so that's why I think it would be disadvantageous for the Bobcats to go out there and try and win. To be honest, 4 games this week and then going into 3 games in 3 days next week, I don't think is a recipe for success. So we didn't really talk about injuries as a way to evaluate tournament favorites because some of that stuff isn't super public knowledge, even for beat writers who talk to coaches. Sometimes coaches just won't talk about it. So like if other teams like Southern Utah's apparently running into some issues, that could be a big factor. Once you have to play 3 or 4 games in 3 or 4 nights, that can certainly kind of flip expectations pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the Montana State teams are both mostly healthy, and so that's another reason to try to be as healthy as you can for the beginning of the tournament. And as Lance said, Sammy Fatkin has been out for a while with at Montana, but they've actually played pretty well without her. They crushed Montana State without her, which she scored 20-something points in a loss to Montana State. So there's a little bit of Ewing theory maybe there, or just I think some people have said it's maybe they can play at a better style without Sammy, or there's her defensive woes maybe hurt them. I mean, you would rather have her obviously for a whole tournament. She's a great player, but that's an interesting wrinkle there of they're playing okay without her. But as we saw the other night, they're still losing games they should win too. So it's not like they've completely been good without her.
Well, that will do it for this stream for the Big Sky Conference. I appreciate y'all for taking the time to join. I have everyone's work that was on the stream linked on the description, YouTube, as well as their Twitter handles, so make sure to go check it out. They all do fantastic work. For everyone in the stream, I am Cam Richardson. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend and enjoy this time of the year. March Madness is great. Embrace all of it. Embrace all the chaos. Thank you all.